Hey guys, welcome to the channel, Third Gear Grind. Today I am rebuilding this 12 valve VR6 motor. The first thing I want to do is check the compression ratio. Regardless, the motor is going to get a full teardown and we're going to do rings, bearings, head gasket, resurface the head. We're going to do valve stem seals, and I'm just going to document all of it. How I'm going to do this compression test is, since the transmission's still on, I'm going to connect a stray battery to these jumper wires. Okay, so I compression tested the motor. This corner is 155 psi. Number 2 was 165 psi. Number 3 was 170 psi. Number 4, 180 psi, that was our highest cylinder. 5 was 165 psi, and number 6 was our lowest at 150 psi. Brand new, this motor should have 210 psi, or around there. Alright guys, so the intake's off, the exhaust is off, the valve cover's off, and check this out. As you can see there, we've got a cracked guide right off the bat. Also, if we look at our upper guide, it's worn down pretty far. There's a crack in the lower guide, and it runs all the way through. It's hard to put the camera far down in there, but yeah, fun times. Good thing this motor didn't blow up. That's one way to do it. Alright, so I managed to get the lower cover off, and the bottom guides are actually okay. The bottom guide and tensioner. But we can see more of the damage on the upper one. Alright, so the cylinder head is off. There's a bit of rust in some of the bores, but also this head gasket has seen better days. Okay, so one thing I found while I was tearing this down earlier, the front knock sensor, the plastic housing cracked on it, and it's been exposed to the weather, so that's going to get replaced. All of these accessories on the front of the block are going to come off because the block is going to get painted. Alright, so I'm just taking the lifters out of the head here. There we go. Our cams, our lifters, our cam caps, all organized. So to replace the valve stem seals, basically what I have to do is I have to press down on that spring and use a magnet to catch the locking collets, and the valves can come out. Then we've got the tower of parts that came off the block. We've got the flywheel, the intake, all the coolant parts, all the timing covers. This is the head gasket we pulled off the block. It's seen some things. Here's the original cylinder head. I got it back from the machine shop. They said it was garbage. And yeah, it makes sense because there is some extreme pitting here. It's kind of hard to get an idea of the depth on camera, but that is almost, that's like over halfway through. But that's not the only issue. The biggest issue is that some of it's pretty close to the fire ring. There's a good divot around the fire ring, and it's like that on quite a few. So when you do the cylinder head resurface, you really want to send the upper timing cover out to machining as well. So I didn't do that. So I ended up having to flat sand the bottom of this timing cover. Worked out though. Now it lines up with the dowels. So I brought the machine shop a new cylinder head. It's from a Mark IV that already used a multi-layer steel, and it doesn't seem like any of that kind of corrosion happens. It got cleaned up, and basically I went ahead and bought this ultrasonic cleaner before I put the pistons and connecting rods back in. I want to clean them, and I've got some cylinder head components that I don't want to put in dirty. It just looks kind of bad with a brand new fresh head, and then you got all these dirty parts inside of it. Okay, so I've already painted the lower timing cover, but for the upper timing cover, since it's a bit more visible, I wanted to pay a bit more attention to it. So as you can see here, there's a bit of sanding marks. These castings, they come pretty rough from the factory. They have a lot of bumps on them. Oh yeah, and if you were wondering what that noise was, it was the ultrasonic cleaner. So I bought a 30 centimeter by 33 centimeter unit, 15 liter, mainly so I could do things like this. This is the entire valve train of the cylinder head in the one basket. I'm just gonna drop it in the ultrasonic cleaner. Okay, so just finishing up the final cleaning of the rods and pistons. Over here, all the valve train is as clean as it's gonna get. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys everything that I've ordered for this rebuild project. Just before I do, I just want to show you these beautiful VR6 pistons and rods. These are the stock rods and pistons. They turned out incredible. They look brand new. We picked up a new VR6 oil pump just because someone I had known was selling one for a good price. As you guys remember, front knock sensor was destroyed, so here's a new one. This is the oil filter housing cap. I just have it here to demonstrate. This is a new oil filter housing cap seal. This one goes between the oil cooler and the oil filter housing. This one commonly leaks. And then this is the one from the oil filter housing to the block, just the two little circles. And we got the belt tensioner pulley. Oftentimes the bearings and the grease will wear out in there and they'll start squeaking on you. Here's the tensioner here. The tensioner never usually fails. We have two oil cooler hoses. I had one of these swell, actually both of them swell on my old 24 valve VR6 oil cooler. It split and started squirting coolant everywhere. So on this project, since these hoses are like 25 years old, just these ones in particular, I just wanted to get brand new. Right over here we have our OEM guides for the timing chains and the tensioner, the upper one and the lower one. We have a brand new water pump. Came with a seal, two L-ring intake manifold gaskets, one's upper, one's head side, and then we have our L-ring head gasket and oil pan gasket. Moving on, we have ARP rod bolts, NGK Ruthenium spark plugs. You got different kinds of spark plugs. You got copper, iridium, platinum, and then these are ruthenium, which are the best. They are the fastest responding spark plugs. OEM piston rings. These are quality, made in Germany. This is the original piston ring on VR6 blocks that Volkswagen used. A lot of these suppliers here that you see is actually OEM. We got IWIS chains. This is the double row style, the early Mark III 96. That's what this motor is. I didn't want to bother converting it, and with this newer style guide here, it shouldn't be a problem in terms of wear. We have brand new bearings. These weren't too bad. It was like 80 bucks. I'm gonna give a full parts list linked in the description, or I'll just write it all out with prices. I believe overall everything ended up totaling about 1,100 Canadian dollars, which is actually not too bad. We even did coolant pipes here, so we got a new thermostat, upper and lower OEM. They're Vaco housings. And then just the crack pipe here. Febi, or no, these are L-ring as well. Valve stem, the seals. So I'm going to be pulling out the old ones. They're pretty crusty and definitely leaked oil. Can't see them right now because the Schrick cams are just kind of sitting in place. Still have to build this head up here. So we got the Schrick lifters, OEM springs. Here's the valves, the caps. Painted the oil filter housing just because it looks better than corroded aluminum. Speaking of painting, did the same thing with all the covers. So this is duplicate color engine enamel. It's the silver stuff, and it turned out amazing. I don't know if I ever got this intake manifold on camera before it was painted, but now it just looks like pure bright silver, no corroded aluminum. It's going to protect the aluminum against corrosion. We did the lower one as well, and then all the covers. So as you can see here, I've numbered the pistons. Some of them are already taken out. I took the rod caps off all the rods and the oil pump off the block. Now it's just a matter of just taking them out. Alright, so having a look at the bores, doesn't look like there's any deep scoring that I can see so far. But we'll see whatever the flex hone can't clean up. Now to protect the crank from debris, as well as hitting the crank with the flex hone, there is some bubble wrap. I snaked a long piece down one of the cylinders and then pulled it over the crank. There's space behind the crank and the block to put bubble wrap just like this. Here's a original bore, and there's the honed one. Alright guys, so we hit a snag in the build. This ended up costing me about 2 weeks of time, so I want to share this experience with you guys so that you can prepare for this in your rebuild if you want to go with OEM piston rings. So in the past, I've rebuilt VR6s with aftermarket piston rings. I've used Grant rings and ITM rings for VR6 standard bore, and they've always had these 3-piece oil control rings. So if you can see there's a top piece, there's the middle copper wavy bit, and then there's the bottom piece. It's 3 pieces. It doesn't stick out past the piston very much. It's very easy to compress. On the OEM piston rings, it's a 2-piece design. Goatse will have this design, and also Kolbenschmidt. This is a 2-piece design. Spring in the middle, single outer piece. And basically, the problem I was running into when I was putting these pistons into the bores, I was trying to do it with my fingers like I've done the aftermarket ones. The spring was just too tight. I knew I was going to break an oil control ring, so I really didn't want to do that. So I knew my only other option was the tapered piston ring installer tool. And Wiseco has a bunch of tapered piston ring compressor tools, but they don't have ones for VR6s. So what Tectonic's tuning does is they take this part number and cut it 15 degrees, the same bore angle as a VR6, so that basically you just plop the piston in this tool and you hammer it down into the bore and you're good to go. So I ended up having to spend the 140 Canadians for this tool. If you have a machine shop hookup, you can get this part number for about 25 to 30 US dollars, and then you can have a machine shop just machine the bottom at a 15-degree angle and you're good to go. So yeah, there are 2 styles of oil control ring that you can get on VR6 pistons if you go with aftermarket or OEM piston rings. So if you want to avoid having to spend the money for a tool like this, go with the aftermarket piston rings. It's going to save you a lot of headache. Or if you really just want OEM piston rings, we shelled it out for this tool. Alright, so this is what the piston ring compressor tool should look like before you put the piston into the block. So as you can see here at the bottom, we've got some pistons sticking out. That will attach to the bore. Then there's the lip of the tool. All the rings are seated in this taper tool, ready to be fully compressed. You want to do this so that you don't run the risk of jamming the rings in the tool. So do this all by hand first. Make sure that your piston rings are rotated accordingly. The bearing is on the conrod. I'm gonna put some assembly lube on it. The crankshaft here is all perfectly clean. Okay, so we're also going to want to make sure that the crank journal is completely out of the way, and then throw this here. So one thing you can do as well to help you guide the connecting rod onto the crank is you can get a 1/4-inch extension and grab the bolt hole just like that. And then you can go ahead and turn the crank until this slides into it perfectly. Obviously you want to make sure that your prong design is on the correct side. Here's a closer shot without the cams in of how the cylinder head turned out. So now I've just got to get down in there, place the valve guide seals. I just kind of go in at it with some needle nose pliers, and what I'll do is I'll like squeeze the top. It'll still be kind of stuck. Oh, it actually came off. If it's still stuck, what I'll do is I'll go on the opposite side that I squeezed and then squeeze again. Kind of makes it go from like a circle to a square and helps with removing it, but this is coming out pretty easy. Okay, so for installation of the new valve guides, basically what I do is I take a 3/8 extension, a 10mm socket. If you see, like, it kind of fits. Okay, it's gonna be, yeah, it fits on the outside. So what I'll do is I'll shove that on there, and I have it just kind of sticks in there, and I just place it on top. And a 3-pound sledge is definitely overkill, but I just give it like a couple taps till you hear the metal clanking. Take it out, and that's it installed. So this is one of the exhaust valves, I'm assuming. And as you can see, there's a lot of crap on here. Some of this is really rock hard, and this valve, it just doesn't look like it's in the best shape. So I'm just gonna replace this with one of the better ones from the old cylinder head. Believe it or not, this came from the new one. Okay, so now I'm gonna show you how I lap the valves on a VR6 cylinder head using my special tool right here. It is a piece of hose stuck in a drill bit. So first you get your drill. You stick the drill in the drill, and then you drill into a piece of hose approximately the size of one VR6 valve. Slap it in the head. Here's our new decked out cylinder head. I'm gonna slap in some valves, bro. Alright, so there's two more in. Okay, that was the last valve. So before I do this, before I start lapping the valve, first thing I want to do is lube the stem of the valve where it rides on the valve guide, because we're going to be spinning this at pretty high speeds. Now before I put it in all the way, obviously we need our valve lapping compound. So this is the stuff that I use. It is Permatex valve grinding compound, pretty widely available, blue graphite looking stuff. Just gonna smear a bit on the back side of the valve seat, and we got our drill hooked up at the back. And so basically I'm just gonna press down with light force, just like make sure it's like seating on there and properly grinding in. We're just gonna spin it. Okay, so here are three valves. The one in the middle is an exhaust valve, and the two on the outside are intake valves, and the one on the left is the one we just ground. The one on the right is one we have not yet ground. Honestly, I'm not expecting a huge difference between the intake valves because they're intake valves, they remain pretty clean. As you can see, the exhaust valves here, pretty dirty around the seat. And then on the seat itself, you can see quite a bit of carbon, or just like little marks from carbon being like stabbed into there or whatever. So if you're planning on doing this, just be careful that you don't touch, obviously, the valve grinding compound on the valve stem, and then put it in. Even if you get a little bit of grit on it, it's gonna screw up your valve guide. Okay, if you guys remember earlier, I did replace one of the exhaust valves, and so as we can see here, I did a bit of valve lapping, and you can see just on the first pass it didn't get everything. There's a small polished part, the rest it got. I'm gonna spend a bit of extra time on this because this valve never was in this hole before. This is how I've set up the new tool. You know, the bar through the side, these guys kind of offset out of the way. So now I'm gonna go ahead, I've dropped one of the valve springs and retainers down there. So I've got two valve keepers here, and I've got a straight pick. And basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a bunch of grease on here, put it up against the keeper, and it should stick. And this will allow me to kind of insert the keepers onto the valve. So I'll try and get some footage of that now. I'm gonna get this valve keeper all the way to the end of the straight pick. Okay guys, so we're going to move on to bottom end timing. Now, when you get a timing chain kit, it doesn't normally come with the bolts. You normally will order those from Volkswagen directly. Now, the ones that you're going to want for the bottom end is this one here. This is a revised bolt for the lower tensioner here. Most of the time they come with 5mm shallow hex bolts that strip, and sometimes you gotta drill them out. So Volkswagen revised these to much heavier duty Torx bolts. So these are T30s. They're a lot stronger than those wimpy shallow 5mm hex bolts. The second bolt that you're going to want is for the intermediate gear here. This is the part number for that one. It goes through two of the gears. Okay, so I just slapped everything on there. So this is on here loosely, and obviously when I take all the slack out on the left side, we're not at the mark. So basically I'm gonna kind of take this gear off of the chain and rotate it until we get that pointer to line up with the mark on the block. Okay, so that was pretty easy. So if you see, if I rotate it this way and then there, we've got no slack on the left side. and our pointer is exactly on the mark, and 100% of our slack should be on this side. Now we can go ahead and install the tensioner, and just like that, our bottom end timing is perfect. Okay, so now we're going to need to torque this intermediate gear bolt, and to do that, I counterhold the crankshaft with the 27mm socket. I got a 15mm socket on this guy, and we're going to 75 foot-pounds. Alright, so the motor's flipped up, oil pan, oil pump is on, engine mount is on, we got the water pump on, water pump pulley, whoop. And so we're about to put the cylinder head on. So before we do that, I did a little bit of a cylinder block resurface, bit of a DIY one, just a very flat sanding block. I very evenly sanded the block. We can even still see the factory machining marks on here. So just before I put the cylinder head on, what I want to do is make sure the block is straight. So this is a straight edge. It's perfectly straight. Put it flat up against the block. Then you want to look underneath to see if any light passes through. So let me get a flashlight here. So this straight edge was about $25 US on eBay. It's not super long, but as you can see, it covers the entire distance of a VR6 block. I could put it this way, this way, this way, this way, and basically check the levelness of the block, because you want it to be very level before you put the head on. Otherwise, you could risk blowing a head gasket. Now the cylinder head we had sent off to the machine shop, and it's perfectly level. So we just gotta make sure that the block is also perfectly level, and most of the time they are, because they're cast iron. And what I did with the 80 grit really is I just took some of the gasket material off, and if there were any high spots, then they were shaved off. So let's see how we're doing. You can also check with a feeler gauge. Now we can see some light in the bore there, but then if we go over to the flat on flat, there's really nothing. This is perfectly flat. So before we put the cylinder head on, we really want to make sure that we have these dowels in the block. Sometimes they get stuck in the cylinder head. Obviously you want to take those out before machining so that you don't destroy one of these, because these are pretty crucial. There's one on each corner here. Okay, so before I put the head on, I'm gonna put the camshaft nuts on the cam caps. So one thing that we want to double check is that all the cam caps are on exactly the way they came off. And to help you with that, Volkswagen marked and put arrows on all of the cam caps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So first off, before we throw these on, we want to rotate the cam to where we can see the tops of all the studs. So exactly right here. And then we're going to put all the nuts on. And then you're going to want to tighten them down. I like to use the 2 caps in the middle, just cross pattern, torque them all the way down. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing for the other camshaft. All right, now that everything is sat down, we're gonna go ahead and torque the cam caps to 15 foot-pounds. We're gonna do a cross pattern on each camshaft. Okay, so what we wanna do now is we wanna get the camshafts to top dead center, specifically so that if we had the cam tool, I don't have the cam tool, that we could slide it in. So this slot is not in the middle. I may have mentioned that already. So you want the smaller part of the slot to be facing up and not down, because if it's down, you won't be able to theoretically fit the cam tool in. When you do this, you're going to push some valves up on the cylinder head. So it's a good idea to have some sort of foam pad underneath like this. Okay, so now our cylinder head is top dead center. So I'm going to grab my 27mm again and just rotate the crank over till we're at top dead center. So this is the last time we're going to see either the pistons or the deck of the cylinder head. So before I throw it on, I'm just going to give it a bit of a brake clean. We got some oil from, or the assembly lube that kind of leaked down. Alright, so we are at top dead center. We also want to make sure that we could see the notch up here first. If you can't see the notch, then you're going to want to rotate it once more. Okay, so it's just sitting loosely. Just want to move it until we hear it sit on the dowels. Now it's time to throw head bolts in. So for 12 valve VR6, there are 3 different sizes. These are the sizes here. So the tallest ones go back here on the front side of the motor. You'll know the bolt is in the wrong hole or is the wrong length for that hole if it just sits down all the way and it's not sticking out of the cylinder head. So in the head gasket, we got this piece of paper from L-Ring, and it gives us the torque specs and the sequence. First tightening sequence, 40 Newton meters, this pattern. Second, 60 Newton meters, this pattern. And then after that, you do 90 on all of them, and then one more 90. Okay, so now it's time for our 90-degree turns. So basically, I'm just going to grab a paint pen, and I'm going to dot all of the bolts at the very top. Once we do our first 90, it's going to be to the right side, and once we do our second, it's going to be exactly to the bottom. Alright, so the head's all torqued. Time to dress up this bare timing cover area. So if you notice there, I was struggling with the upper guide, and it turned out to be just Euro parts garbage. The entire rest of the kit was genuine iWis components and some Febby stuff in there. And this one is a Euro parts part, and the entire guide is twisted. So not only was it really hard to get on the actual guide pin, but when I bolted it on, it then sat flat against the cylinder head, but if I took the bolts out, it was all twisted and it wouldn't sit flat. So now we've got a genuine guide. These aren't actually super expensive. Now before this cover goes on, you want to make sure that you have this green O-ring in here. Sometimes you can reuse the old one if it's still bumpy, but if not, this is the part number for a new one from the dealer. It's pretty cheap. So I had one of these brand new oil caps lying around. That's the part number if you guys want it. Alright guys, so this is the finished result of the 12 valve VR6 rebuild project. It turned out really good. I'm actually blown away at how well all the paint came out. All these brand new shiny parts, and the inside looks just as good as the outside. This thing should make some power. I didn't originally want to throw the exhaust on for transportation reasons. It's a little awkward sticking out of the side of the motor. But I had to because this lift bracket here actually mounts onto the exhaust manifold studs, and it's not going to sit straight or still if there's no headers on the engine. So that's it guys. I hope you enjoyed this 12 valve VR6 engine rebuild video. I hope to cover the car that it's getting swapped into. It's actually going to be a Mark II Jetta coupe. So stay tuned for that guys, and see you in the next one.